So the last few days, I've watched over 33 fights of Israel Adesanya and Anderson Silva. There was a lot of backlash on Israel Adesanya, and there still is, especially after the Sean loss. I posted a video how he's going to bounce back. Comments were all Anderson Silva this, Anderson Silva that. And I was like, okay, fine. I'm going to watch their fights. So from the Chris Lebanon fight for Anderson Silva all the way to the Weidman fight, watched all those. Israel Adesanya from his first UFC fight to his most recent, watched all those. Over 33 fights. And I had to decide who is the best middleweight in the UFC. At the end of it, I chose a winner. I picked... Hey guys, welcome to the False Nine podcast here with episode 165. My bad. I hope you guys enjoyed that intro. Trying something a little different. And I hope you guys are excited to watch this video. You know, we got Israel Adesanya versus Anderson Silva. Who is the best middleweight of the ever in the UFC? And like I mentioned, I watched a lot of fights. I postponed this video I think 2 times. It's supposed to be 163, and it came out to 165. So yeah, I worked a little hard. I took a lot of notes on the video, and took a lot of notes on the fights, things like that. So I also want to talk about UFC Fight Night, of course, a little bit. So let's get right into it. First thoughts. I'm not even gonna look at my notes. First thoughts on watching Anderson Silva fight. You know, I never got to see Anderson Silva fight. You know, I was too young about to know anything. I didn't know too much about the UFC, and just, you know, didn't know too much. He started really early in the UFC, like 2000 shit, I don't know, but early 2000s. And I just know what fight I watched first was 2006, but he had a few more before then. And first thoughts, I mean, the guy was a beast. I mean, he destroyed everyone he fought. Every fight that I saw, it was just, except like towards the end, it was just domination. The other pattern that I had noticed watching Anderson Silva fight was the people he was fighting, his opponents, the styles of fights, how the fights went. It was very, very, very different. I didn't realize how much the sport has advanced, and it gives me I kind of push back on my own self now when I talk about some of these older fighters, because they were in different eras. The game was completely different from what it is now. So, you know, I might say so-and-so's better now than the person was before, but, you know, times were different back then. The sport wasn't advanced as how it is now, and I'm not taking anything away from Anderson Silva. But the sport now, you know, of MMA, especially in the UFC, I mean, it's advanced. It's so much more different than what it used to be just 10 years ago. So keep that in mind when I'm speaking about all this. And that's one of the biggest things that I've noticed watching Anderson fight, besides that he was just a fucking animal and dominated everyone he fought until his last few wins. So let's get right into it, you know. Let's see, what do I have first? I mean, he made everybody look easy, like I have mentioned, dominated everyone except towards his last ones. One impressive win that really stood out to me, you know, and this is maybe because I know who this person is. I don't know a lot of the guys that Anderson Silva fought, if I'm being honest. So, you know, when he went up to fight Forrest Griffin, he's the first, I think, UFC fighter that I actually knew that was in the UFC. And the only reason why I knew about Forrest Griffin is because I played UFC 2. That's the only reason why I know about. And I loved using him because I did a Superman punch every time with Forrest Griffin. And when it landed, it fucking knocked out my opponent. So that's how I got introduced to the UFC. That's how I got introduced to Forrest Griffin. So when he went up and fought Forrest Griffin, a former light heavyweight champ, if I'm not mistaken, and Anderson Silva put him out, made him look easy. And when I saw that, I was like, oh, shit, you know, Anderson Silva has heavy fucking hands. You know, to move up and to do that to someone like Forrest Griffin, I'm like, damn, it was cool to see. It was amazing. And, I mean, that was a test. I mean, that was one of the first tests for Anderson Silva. Again, I don't know too many of those guys prior, but I know that every fight he dominated. Just pure domination from Anderson Silva. And for how long he did it was so impressive. He fought so much. I have the dates here, if I'm not mistaken. Let me just run that real quick. So 2006, he had 2 fights. 2007, he had 3 fights. 2008, he had 3 fights. He only had 1-9 against Forrest Griffin. He had, was it 2 fights in 2010. And then he had 2 fights in 2011, 2 fights in 2012, and then 2 fights in 2013. So I mean, he was active. He was very active, and he was fighting on a constant basis. And these are all, except for the first fight, the Chris Lebanon fight, those are all title fights. All of them. Actually, not true, except for like 3 of them when he would move up and things like that. So very impressed, and I was like, damn, like he was pretty magical and pretty impressive to see. But here's the but, you could say. When I watched Israel Adesanya, when I was watching Israel Adesanya's fights, I felt like I was watching something completely different. Fighting stylistic wise, you could say. Very different because, again, it was just 2 different times, 2 different eras, 2 different ways that people fought in those times, So, as soon as Izzy had his first fight against a wrestler, I forgot his name, but, and I'm going to go back to Anderson Silva here in a second. When he fought that guy, you just noticed the difference. And I was like, damn, it was night and day difference. So, and to go back a little bit to Anderson Silva, when Anderson Silva fought, who did he fight? He fought Chael Sonnen for the first time. Let me see what year this was. I want to say it was, so when he fought Chael Sonnen in 2010, it was his 2010, fought Chael Sonnen. And Chael Sonnen's not to take anything from Chael, very good fighter, but never was like elite, like up there, because he got dominated by John Jones, lost to Anderson Silva twice. So just right under those guys. I'm sure there's other few guys that he did beat and didn't beat. But Chael went in, and in the first 2 minutes, Chael Sonnen had did what no one was able to do to Anderson Silva. Dropped Anderson Silva within 2 minutes of the first round, and then just ragdolls him the whole round. And then for the rest of the fight, Chael Sonnen was winning that fight against Anderson Silva, and I'm pretty sure at the time everyone thought that Anderson Silva was going to lose that fight. And Anderson Silva was losing that fight. But the last round, I forgot what minute it was, Chael's tired. He has mount. And then Anderson Silva sneaks in the triangle choke. Taps him out. And Anderson Silva's still the champ. And I think that an undefeated, or he has his streak still alive. And that was the first fight that I think Anderson Silva got really, really, really tested with the new, entering the new era of MMA, you could say, right? So then he goes and beats Victor Belfort. I don't know Vitor Belfort, like his history. I know he's a legend, and a lot of people talk about him all the time. So I don't want to talk too much about that. He fights Chill again. Same thing kind of happens, but Anderson Silva's a little bit more ready than before. So he TKOs Chill, and then he has, who does he fight? He has Stephen Boner. Just kind of, you can start to see Anderson Silva slowing down, ever since the Chael fight. The Chael Sonnen fight, you can really see that Anderson Silva was not what he was at one point. And then to fast forward a little bit, he fights Chris Weidman for the first time. And in that fight, to me, again, you see Anderson start to slow down. You see him kind of get caught a few times. Not as mobile, not as fast, not as quick, reacting. It's just, you can start to see him slow down. But there was a time in the fight where, he starts to taunt Chris Weidman. I don't know why. And then Chris Weidman just catches him on his chin and takes him out. TKO. It's over. And I'm like, damn. And that, to me, like, Anderson Silva was able to get away with shit like that before. But, like, in this era that it was transitioning to, you couldn't do that anymore. If you can't be taunting like that, especially early on the fight, like first or second round, you got caught, put out. And we all know what happened in the second fight. I don't want to talk about it because it's kind of gruesome. But I mean, ever since that, I mean, Anderson Silva has never bounced back, you know, and I forgot who was the guy that he was able to beat, but he just went on to lose almost every fight except for one in the UFC. He ended up fighting Israel Adesanya, and when he fought Israel Adesanya, that to me was when Anderson Silva passed the torch to Anderson Silva. I mean, Anderson Silva passed the torch to Israel Adesanya to kind of take over the middleweight division, you know, and to talk about Israel Adesanya now in his time in the UFC, you know, the first guy he fought was a decent test. I think that guy only had like 2 or 3 fights in the UFC in total. So not a very difficult opponent when you look at Izzy now, but at the time, I'm sure it was a good matchup. And I mean, from the start, Izzy's feints, his footwork, and one thing that I'm going to keep saying about Izzy on this video was his takedown defense. You know, this guy was a decent wrestler, and Izzy just couldn't get taken down. I don't know if he did it or once or twice on this fight, but it was so impressive. And the reason why I bring that up about the takedown, because, again, the time that we're in now, where the UFC fighters are so versatile and so advanced and have so many different weapons when it comes to jiu-jitsu, wrestling, striking. There's just so many more avenues in those styles of fighting. So, you know, Anderson Silva didn't have to deal with too many wrestlers, you know, or anything like that. His takedown defense was great, but when he fought Chael, look what happened. But, you know, Izzy, I mean, he stuffed the takedowns to look great, and then he won that fight. And then, I mean, after that, I want to say who was a big name that he beat and that got him the title fight. So, he fought Kelvin. That was the interim title. And, I mean, that was a war. And, I mean, Izzy got caught a few times. Kelvin was a big guy. And that's another thing, too. In the middleweight, when you look at when Anderson's fighting, those guys were a lot smaller, like slimmer. They just looked smaller. When you look at when Izzy's fighting these guys, they don't look 185. They look huge, and Izzy's small. So, Izzy's always the smallest one, but kind of seems to be always the strongest too, which is kind of weird. So, you know, in the Kelvin fight, it was a fucking war, but you can start to see Izzy pick him apart throughout later in the fight. You know, 3, 4, and 5, it was just Izzy all day, just picking him apart, you know, just beating him up, leg kick, strike. It was masterclass from Izzy, and I was like, oh shit. And then I could see why the hype was so real from Izzy, and I didn't understand it at first when his name was kind of really trending when he was coming up in the UFC. So Izzy goes and does that, really, you know, and goes and fights, like I said, Kelvin. Then he goes and fights Anderson, and then he fights Anderson, and then he fights Kelvin, and then he fights Robert Whittaker for the title. That was one of, I think, still one of the best performances of Izzy, you know, because Robert Whittaker was scary at the time. Looked very scary, very threatful, and everyone thought that it was too early for Izzy, that this test was too early. And for Izzy to drop Whittaker in the first, it was like, what the fuck? And then for Izzy just to TKO him, you know, it's just like, damn, he made it fucking look easy. You know, and before then, when people were talking, it was like, oh, how's Izzy going to handle it? Even the fight before, is it too early for Izzy? Is he being thrown to the sharks way too early? This, and that. But again, Izzy's takedown defense, amazing. His fucking footwork, A1. And the feints, we all know the feints. And then his style of fighting, always leading. It's his leg kicks. That's where he's going to take the fight. You just pay attention to the leg kicks, in my opinion. You know, this is all my opinion. So he does that to Robert Whittaker, and everyone's like, oh, shit, this guy's the real motherfucking deal. So, and then after Robert Whittaker, he goes and fights Yoel Romero, first title defense. That fight was really weird because they didn't really throw much, you know, and both of them had their own perspectives on the fight and how it went. But, again, Izzy's the champion. Yoel Romero is the challenger. Yoel needs to dethrone the champ, take the belt away from the champ. And he tried, but, I mean, he didn't. So you kind of got to take the fight to him if you're the runner-up. That's just how it is. Like, if the champ wanted to, because Mayweather did this all the time. If you could just sit there, play defense, and then counter. And Izzy was careful. He was cautious. He was disciplined. That's the thing, too. Another thing I noticed about Izzy, he is so disciplined. He has a game plan, and he sticks to it no matter what. His game plan doesn't change. It's the same. And he's just consistent to his, he just sticks to it. And that's it. That's one thing that I noticed. From the first round, whoever he's fighting, to the last round, whether it ends early or goes all 5 rounds, he sticks to the game plan and doesn't change a fucking thing. He adjusts during the fight, of course, but his game plan is the same. And that's so impressive, like, to be that disciplined no matter what happens in the fight. You stick to your game plan. You trust your coaches. You trust the game plan. Like, that's huge. That's huge that he doesn't panic and switch it up. He doesn't get caught and switches. Like, he has his game plan, and he's disciplined, and he sticks to it. And that's very impressive to see, when you're fighting elite fighters on a constant, on a constant basis. So he gets that fight with Yoel, and this fight was major because what Paulo Costa had did to Yoel and how that fight went and how it was just like a war for 3 rounds. And then, everyone, Paulo Costa's chirping at Izzy, and everyone thinking Costa's going to win. I think that Costa was the favorite when he fought Izzy. And then, you go in there with Izzy. Costa goes in there with Izzy, and he doesn't look like Costa from Yoel Romero. And this is when I start to think, I was like, fuck, like, when people get in the ring with Israel Adesanya, it's a whole different story, man. People can say what they want and talk all they want. But when I saw Paulo fight Yoel, and then he goes and fights Izzy, he didn't look like that. Izzy caught him, throw the leg kicks, of course, and then caught him with that nasty head kick to the face where he cuts him open. And that's when you can start to see Paulo get hurt. Then Izzy just keeps fucking up his left leg, and then just during the clinch throwing bombs, and he gets caught by Izzy's left hand, puts him out. And this is Paulo Costa who did what he did to Yoel, and everybody was talking all this shit about Izzy, that he didn't do what he did to fucking what's his name, to what he did to that what Paulo did to Yoel. And Izzy couldn't do that to Yoel. So everyone thought that Paulo was going to run through Izzy, and it was going to be a long night for Izzy. And then for what Izzy did to Paulo, it was just fucking, it was unbelievable. It was impressive. And nobody gives that credit to Izzy, right? So, then he goes and fights Marvin. He goes, fights Robert. We all know how this fight goes, and, whatever. Another thing is, when I started watching the Robert Whittaker, the second fight, and then the Marvin second fight, I can understand why people get a little annoyed that Izzy keeps winning. Because Izzy, like I said, when he goes in there, all these opponents look great against other fighters. All of them. Marvin, Robert, Kelvin, Paulo. They all look great. But when they get in there with Izzy, it's a whole different story. And Izzy breaks him down, picks you apart. He doesn't just put you out. He picks you apart, and if he can, he will finish you. But he picks you apart. If it got to go 5 rounds, it goes 5 rounds. But you didn't win. You got picked apart. For whoever Izzy's fighting, it must suck. It's a long night. Your game plan isn't working. Izzy takes that away from his opponent. And he did that to Robert Whittaker in the second fight. He did it to Marvin in the second fight. He did it to fucking Jared. Like, bro, Izzy just did that. So then we get to the Alex fight. And this fight had all the storyline, things like that. And then, he catches Alex in the first, almost finishes him, and everyone's like, oh, Izzy's going to win. It's one of those fights. He picks him apart, takes him to the ground, picks him apart, and then we get to the 5th round, he gets caught. And it's over for Izzy. It's like, fuck. Right? Izzy comes back, bounces back, and shows everyone that he's the best in the world. Boom. And then he fights Sean Strickland. This is where, obviously, we know how that fight went. I honestly think Izzy just underestimated Sean. But what Sean was able to do was not get hit with those leg kicks, which is so important. And then also, too, no one's able to close the distance with Izzy without getting hit. Sean closed the distance and did not get touched. He was just in his face all the time and didn't get hit like that. So, he put Izzy in a situation where he wanted to stick to his game plan, but it wasn't working. So, we know how that shit went. Now, to kind of conclude the comparison of these two guys, it was just 2 different times, 2 different eras, 2 different fighters. Anderson Silva is going to be the OG, the middleweight OG. He's going to be a GOAT. But, you know, if you put Anderson Silva in the era of now, I don't think he'd be as dominant as he was. He'd be dominant, but not as he was. You know, if you put Israel in that era, that Anderson Silva, I mean, I think Israel runs through those guys. So for me, I mean, Israel Adesanya is the GOAT, the middleweight GOAT, the best ever to exist in that division, because who he has fought, the style of fighters that who he's fought, and then how he makes them look, picks you apart, and it's over. And that's what Israel's able to do, except for Sean Strickland. I'm not going to talk about the rematch because this is not what that video is about. But, yeah, you know, I came to the realization of that, you know, watching the Izzy fights. I was like, I can't make the comparison. It's just not fair. It's two different times. I felt like I was watching two different organizations. It was just so different, night and day. And, I mean, I don't know. Izzy in this time is so dominant. And how the sport is so advanced, it just makes me think that Izzy is the better fighter overall. So, and the only one who's been able to do what Izzy has done, and I don't care what you guys say, is Jon Jones. Jon Jones is the only other champion that I know about who's been able to dominate how Israel Adesanya has dominated in a division. Point blank. Like, if you can, and if you guys say GSP and Khabib, please give me a reason. Don't just say, oh, GSP. And first of all, GSP, I mean, well, people make it seem like they found the same division, and they didn't. GSP moved up a few times in the middleweight, but tell me why GSP is the middleweight champion. Please tell me. Tell me why. I mean, not the middleweight champion, but why he's better than Israel Adesanya. Please do it. I want an explanation. Same thing with Khabib. Please explain to me how Khabib is better than Israel Adesanya on a GOAT list or pound for pound list. I need an explanation, because I'm not going to go too much into detail about Khabib. You know, you can make a solid argument for Khabib, but for GSP, as much as a legend as he is, the consistency and the domination that Izzy has done, it's just so much. It's too much, you know, and I can't think of another fighter except for Jon Jones. And maybe I'm biased, you know, and I'm not biased for Israel Adesanya. I'm biased maybe because I'm in this era, I'm in this time, so I'm going to favor a fighter that's fighting in this time. So I don't know, but that's me. Izzy has 6 fights in boxing, 80 fights in kickboxing, 27 in MMA. Silva has 5 fights in boxing, 46 in MMA. So just want to put that out there. Izzy has, I mean, he's been doing kickboxing for the longest, and, you know, Anderson Silva, and then he went to MMA, and Anderson Silva just did MMA and boxing. So I'm going to just let y'all think about that, and, I mean, y'all can decide who's the GOAT and who's the best in the middleweight division. So recently, just got announced, you know, Izzy pleaded guilty for driving under the influence. And, bro, people were all over his ass, and it was insane. I'm like, bro, how do you guys just switch up on somebody so fast? You see somebody have it all, and you guys are so happy when they're just on, like when they fall. And I'm like, bro, what the fuck? I'm confused. I'm really confused on the MMA community that really are happy that this happened to Israel Adesanya. And for the people to think that this happened after the Sean fight, I'm like, you guys are fucking ridiculous. I'm like, what is there to celebrate about Izzy losing to Sean? What is there to celebrate about Izzy driving drunk? What is there to celebrate? Why do you guys take everything else that he's done in the division and in the sport away from him? Why do you guys do that? I don't fucking get it. And it's mad annoying that you guys just shit on these people that have achieved so much in the sport that we fucking love and watch on Saturdays and pay money for that. And then you guys talk about like, oh, like he did this after the Sean fight. And then you guys are rooting for his fucking downfall. And I'm like, you guys are fucking idiots. Plain and simple. I'm sorry to say that, but that's just how I feel. And it makes me upset. And again, I'm not a fan of Izzy like that. But he's he's one of the best ever in the UFC. And he's greatness. And when he goes away, like, we're going to we don't need to take him for granted, and a lot of people are, and we need to appreciate greatness while we have it. All right, so we had UFC Fight Night this weekend, and I'm going to be real honest with you guys. I only got to watch the Fiziev fight versus Gamrot because I was out on low vacay, but I did get to watch the Bryce Mitchell fight again today. Thoughts on Bryce Mitchell. I think he's playing a fucking character now. It's kind of weird. It looks like he wants to make some money in the UFC, which is good for him. But the character he's playing is a little weird. Like, he's playing the Christian guy and talking about the devil this. And, you can't really talk negatively about God and Christianity or the Bible. But I find it weird that that's the character you chose to run with and to have a Bible. Because, when it comes to religion, it's a very intimate and personal relationship with yourself. So I think it's kind of weird that he's going to play that role and play that character. So I don't know, man. But, if that's what Bryce Mitchell wants to do, more power to him. I think they're going to talk to him and be like, hey, man, this is what you can do and this is what you can't do. So, so hopefully he doesn't go too crazy with it. I just don't hope he doesn't turn into a Kobe Covington. That's all I wish for, He had a good fight. Wrestling is A1. Got caught a little bit, but overall, it did really good. And, he bounced back from that ugly loss to Aaliyah. Now, he just has to step up and have another test. And I still am not fully convinced from Bryce Mitchell, but I do want to see him do good. I really do. I really do want to see him succeed in the division and be a threat in the division, and one of the best. Now, for the Gamrot and Fiziev fight, I was very disappointed in the fight, because of the injury ended the fight. Fiziev went for the leg kick and it kind of hit Gamrot's elbow. And I feel like, I'm sure it's out there, but some part in the knee of Fiziev just messed up. And this is how much I haven't been on social media that I don't know what happened. But I'm sure it's there. Got injured. Gamrot got the win. I don't know who Gamrot is like that. Not a fan. And not that I dislike him. But he celebrated the win a little too much. I'm like, hey, Fiziev is a very strong and a good contender. And you beat him by he got injured. So you didn't really beat him. So you really didn't pass the test, in my opinion. If you didn't really pass the test and you think you passed the test, the next guy you fight, it's going to be a tough fight. It's going to be a tough fight for you, man. It's going to be tough. So, I wish the best for Gamrot, but if I'm Gamrot, I'm going to humble myself and be like, that wasn't really your win. I understand you might move up in a ranking, up or two, but, that win doesn't weigh a lot. You beat a guy who was injured, and you were at the point in the rankings where you're going to fight killers. Dustin Poirier, Justin Gaethje, Michael Chandler, Beneil. Those are the guys you're fighting now. And Fiziev was the first test, and you beat him in a weird way. He got hurt. So, in my opinion, there's nothing to celebrate about. Nothing really too happy to be about. I'm sure it's good for him, good for his camp, things like that. But in reality is, it's not really a win. The guy was injured. So, I wish him the best. I hope he does good. And for Fiziev, I hope he can bounce back because I was really excited to see him fight this fight. But, he's still very young, and hopefully this injury is not too hard on him. So I wish him the best. We have Canelo on Friday, so stay tuned for that. I really hope you guys enjoyed this video. A little bit longer than I thought it was going to be. So hope you guys enjoyed. See you guys on Friday. Enjoy the rest of the week. Peace and love.